Welcome back to Purrfect Takes. I'm your host, Stephen Patton, joined as always by my co-host and dear friend Jacob Acquire. We had a 2 week hiatus, and unfortunately, between different things with work last week and then people working on the outside of my apartment, making I think the noise quality somewhat problematic. We ended up in this dilemma. We'll go over the Jets' victory, the Bills' loss, do a little mid-season review at the halfway point, and look ahead to kind of where we stack up in the division, and I think more relevant, the upcoming matchup we have at Lambeau Field against the Green Bay Packers. Jacob, how are you doing this Tuesday?
Doing well. I could be better if I didn't have to watch Andy Dalton uh, be trotted out onto the field every series. But, it is what it is. We're sitting here we're in week nine, game week nine, at 4-4. 500 doesn't feel so bad when you look back and see that last year we would be what, 1-7 at this point. The year before, we would also be 1-7, maybe 1-6 because we had an early bye week in Bryce's rookie year. And then going back to the Matt Rule years, we were never above 500 at this point. I don't think so. It could be worse, but the bad taste in my mouth from the Buffalo Bills game makes me think it could also be better.
It's the ebbs and flows that come with any season, but I think when we particularly look at this team under the Dave Canales regime, the average points in a loss are like awful. Like we're talking about like some of the worst we've seen over the past couple decades from a coaching perspective. So there's an element of when we're overwhelmed, we seem to get boat raced and we don't know how to recover or just like hold our own. Like these 40-point performances are getting a little alarming at this point. I'm not too concerned about like the James Cook rushing performance. He obviously broke a couple big ones. I think the biggest issue you can take away from that matchup was the Bills' offensive line is bigger than our defensive line. Like they are one of the best at moving people, and I think that just showed itself on Sunday that they were able to kind of wear down our front, and James Cook was able to take advantage. I don't know some of the big key takeaways you had from that. I know Andy Dalton, like there's been a subset of the Panthers fan base that has been in support of him starting over Bryce Young the past couple of seasons. And I think in spurts, you go back the past couple of years, he's played admirably well to fill in, but it does not look that way or did not look that way against Buffalo. And I think having Bryce Young back for the Packers game will be big because Dalton's no longer the player he was. I think that is a realization the Panthers organization needs to come to, and finding a an alternative or a better backup is going to be a priority this upcoming offseason.
Yeah, the Dalton contingency in the fan base, they got what they wanted. He's not a good player anymore, just plain and simple. I think if you take a step back, we're probably 1-7 if he is the starter for the entire season. The Falcons game, I think, is the one we win because number one, we shut them out, and number two, the Falcons' offense was just horrific in that game. So I think we could have gotten that win, but with Dalton behind center, he's a statue at this point. He lacks mobility. He had 7 sacks taken, and I would say probably 5 of them were on him. There were injuries to our offensive line, but he's immobile. And the one time he was mobile, he got hawked down by, I think it was Greg Rousseau, who stripped him for a fumble in the red zone. So not very good performance there from Dalton. You brought up the Bills offensive line kind of out muscling our defensive line. I think the Bills have the best offensive line in the league, plain and simple.
Mhm.
That wasn't a huge uh, alarm bell to me. Like I didn't think Cook would run for 200 yards, but I thought he'd get 100. Like I thought he would be respectable compared to what the Panthers had done the last 3 weeks, which was hold three combined running backs between our teams, I should say, between the Dolphins and Devon Achane, the Cowboys and Javante Williams, and the Jets, who just had a monster rushing performance in their first win of the season. All those teams combined had 80 rushing yards. And now you see 200 plus rushing yards. I think that's the stark difference that shocks a lot of people.
Again, it goes back to those big explosive runs. I think he had a 60 plus yard run. I think he had another couple other explosive runs. And it's like you stack those up. He didn't have a lot of carries. It's just those add up and made a large majority of those yards you see. And it's just when you win against our defensive front, which is where we poured a lot of our offseason investments into, we don't have help necessarily the way we would like at the linebacker or safety level. And it's like that those are the guys that are then next up to make those plays. And so I think that just it echoed kind of those depth concerns, and we were a little bit out of our league in terms of Sunday, and that's why. And we'll get to it with the Green Bay Packers, but you want to talk about like a line of similarity. The Packers have built their offense and specifically their offensive line very similar to the Buffalo Bills, where they poured a ton of resources into that, so they just dominate you up front. And that gives me a little bit of concern. But to go back to the Jets victory, you win your first game on the road. That gives you a little bit of morale boost. The first time you're over 500 in a couple of years since the Matt Rule era, which is several coaches ago at this point for the organization. And those are stepping stones you want to build on. So as we're talking about like a mid-season review, I thought this was a team coming into the year where there were people in the fan base, even some outside like national media people having this team almost sneak in like a wild card. And I thought that was a little premature. I felt like there were still a couple holes on this roster and there were going to be growing pains. And so I think 7-8 wins is still very realistic. What I thought at the beginning of the season right now, and being at the halfway point and you're already halfway there makes me feel very confident that we're heading in that right direction. And the last time we were on air, that's exactly what we discussed. We were very excited about the direction this organization's heading. Are there any other points that you feel like jump off the page, headliners for 8 weeks into the season for this organization?
You started by talking about how we don't lose close games, we get blown out. I think that's something that we just need to fix, be more competent, right? That's why the Cardinals game, I think, felt refreshing, even though it was a loss, because we stormed back after a really tough first quarter. And then I kind of think we were playing with house money after getting the only recovered onside kick of the season, still to this point so far. But we lose that one in a close fashion. But the 4 wins, the comeback wins, you could say we went band for band with the Cowboys, who are probably one of, if not the best, at moving the ball down the field. Up until last week, I think Denver stifled them a little bit. The other big takeaway has to be the run game on offense, the emergence of Rico Dowdle as, I'm not going to call him a superstar, but I'll call him a top 10 running back in the league. That's what he's been when he's been the starter. And then the issues with splitting carries between Dowdle and Chuba Hubbard, who's the incumbent player who was the starter, a huge leader on the team. He earned himself a significant contract extension during the season last season, and trying to figure that out. I think the handling of it has been poor the last 2 games. You can get away with splitting carries against the Jets because their defense isn't great. You can't do it against the Bills when the Bills are bigger up front and they have a guy who just won MVP on the other side of the ball. You have to score as much as you can, and you don't have your starter in. You had Andy Dalton in. Dave Canales, the head coach, addressed that this past week in his presser and said, basically said, we're going to try to get Rico Dowdle more carries. I feel like that's the right move, but I also don't like that it took this long when it was very clear from the jump, even in the Jets game when they both played, that Rico's the better performer right now. So I think that's the other main talking point, is that we got to get the run game figured out, because that's what this team wants to be, is a run first team, a team to keep pounding, if you will. And once Bryce is back, I think he's at his best under center, doing stuff off play action, off the run game. I think that's got to be figured out pretty quick, because, like you said, I think the Packers are the best opponent we're going to face this year, like just straight up. So you're going to have to figure that out.
And to nullify their pass rush, you're going to have to lean into that run game and use that to your advantage. And I think to your point, the signs were there in that Jets game is that even with like kind of a split approach, Rico was just so much more explosive. And to lean away from that and make it to where he has his lowest, I think, touch count since like week 1 against the Jaguars was absurd. And obviously, like when you get into negative game scripts and you're down multiple scores, it's going to change kind of the personnel on the field. But to limit his involvement in the offense because you paid a guy and there's the guy in a locker room who's been there longer and is a captain, and you have a lot of these wrinkles for Chuba where it's just like that's a guy who everybody looks up to, but I think this is a business at the end of the day, and this isn't about like people's feelings. It's about making sure that you're doing what you have to put your team in a position to win games. And it was like you benched Bryce Young a year ago because he wasn't hitting the standard, and it's not that Chuba Hubbard's a bad football player, but Rico's better, and you should play your better players. It was absurd, like when we saw how good Jalen Coker was last year in his rookie year, and how long it was taking him to kind of insert himself in the lineup. And it's like how much more explosive we've been with different personnel packages with Jimmy Horn on the field. And it's just, how does it take you so long to get here? And from a rookie development standpoint, them understanding the playbook and their role, it takes some time. But with this situation with Rico Dowdle and Chuba Hubbard, you hit the head on the nail where it's just inexcusable. Like when you're going up against a really good team, you need to make sure you're playing your best players. Otherwise, you're not going to have a shot.
I think another one, and I was just thinking about this season, was Austin Corbett versus Cade Mays. You can make a case that Bryce was pretty bad the first couple weeks. Austin Corbett was far and away our worst player
Horrendous.
the first 2 weeks of the season. And when he goes down and Cade Mays stepped in, it was like all of the problems were instantly solved. Not all, but like most of the center problems were solved. Protections were in quicker. There were no parts where Bryce had to call a timeout with 1 second left because the snap was in. People were lined up quicker. All of that with Cade Mays in there, and that was how it was last year too. What during our run in the second half of the season, Cade Mays was the center. He had the rapport with Bryce Young, and in the offseason, if Corbett won the competition, I just don't see how. Even when Corbett filled in for Damian Lewis, the left guard, versus the Jets, he looked out of sorts on the left side. And granted, he's not a left guard, but still, there are a lot of stifled runs because of that. Corbett's probably going to have to start at right guard now that Brady Christensen is going to be out for the year. But it's things like this where I think favoring the veteran doesn't necessarily doesn't set the team up in a correct position to have a better chance to win, I guess is how I would put it. And I'm glad that Canales is taking accountability, at least in press conferences, and saying it's about helping the Panthers win, like this week with the running backs, like he talked about with the centers once Cade stepped in. But that's got to happen quicker. Like we were so quick to bench Bryce Young after 2 weeks last year. Deserved, right? He was actively sabotaging the offense. But you have to be that quick with other stuff too. You think about the start of the year. Jimmy Horn didn't play the first 4 games. The first play of the Patriots game was a jet sweep to David Moore, who's not a fast guy whatsoever. Coincidentally, I don't think he broke. I think he dislocated his elbow on that play and has been out since. But now Jimmy Horn gets like 10 yards carry on those, right? It's like, I feel like the things are there. The solutions are there. You just have to be willing to trust the younger players more. And I think as the season goes on, we'll see Canales start to do that. Hunter Renfrow has been inactive since Jimmy Horn's been active, so that's a big step. But I think that's going to be one of the defining points of the season is allowing the younger players to take over and help this team get some wins.
And leaning into the youth and the youth movement is kind of what this regime's all about. Like you're trying to build this up from the ground up. And don't get me wrong, like when you bring veterans in or have veterans on the team that are meant to be the starters, in the case of the Austin Corbett example or Chuba Hubbard in the current situation, those are excellent examples of just like why is the coach just taking his time with this? Because if you see it's not working, then you need to reshuffle some things. It's not like we're undefeated and you don't want to mess up a good thing just because one player's struggling. It's like you're not winning football games. You need to figure out kind of like your best lineup. And that doesn't mean you have to reshuffle things every week. But if Austin Corbett doesn't get hurt, like how long does it take until Cade Mays Brees is inserted as the starter, or is he never supplanted? And that goes back to just like what has to shift in the ideology, because like it shouldn't come to the players having the captains on the team having a conversation with their coach about like how best to use them. Like it's just like, what are you doing well as a head coach if you're not able to identify talent? Because that's what you're supposed to do with the roster given you, is play your best players. And we'll see if it changes. Like you said, he's admonishing or admonishing, I don't know what exactly the term, like accountability, and in taking like, hey, this is on me. But that only goes so far if it keeps costing your team wins.
For sure. I think we can't really do the Andy Dalton thing as an example this past week with like Hendon Hooker or any of the backups or anything, just because like I think he kept Dalton in to like make him wear this loss, and that's understandable. This was a really bad loss. But those are kind of my key takeaways from the season. I would say the run defense up to this past week, I think, had been a revelation, right? The front on defense, I think, is worth what we spent in the run game outside of Buffalo and Jacksonville. The pass rush is starting to come along as well. I think that's another key thing. Not by coincidence, because Nick Scorton is starting and Princely Umamielen gets more reps too. Nick Scorton, by the way, chased Josh Allen for about 50 yards and then sacked him for like a 20-yard loss this past week. Very good player. He should be getting many more snaps than what he's been getting. But I think, do you want to review or preview the Packers game now, or look at how we're stacking up within the division halfway through the season?
Well, I think ending with the game that is coming up is probably fitting. But talking about like 5 of our 6 division games being during these last 9 games of the year, I think this is a pivotal moment. Like you have 2 winnable games against the Saints, you have a rematch against the Falcons. Those are games that you need a bucket in that win column, and then you got to find a way to split with the Buccaneers. But I don't know how you want to discuss the division, because I think for the most part this is shaping up how we envisioned this prior to the year. We knew the Saints were going to be one of the worst teams in the league. We honestly thought the Falcons would be worse. I mean, the fact that they've somehow managed victories against teams like the Bills is kind of perplexing, but here we are. But like, is this shocking, like how the division is shaping up? Because I think both of us thought the Panthers would be vying for the second or third place in the division.
And I'm not shocked whatsoever, right? Tampa Bay is 6-2. They've just been devastated by injuries like everywhere, mostly on offense, and they're still able to win games against good teams. They're a real team, right? I think we can call them a real team. Excuse me. I don't know if I would call them like a top 3 team in the league, despite that's what their record is, but they're certainly among the playoff. You can guarantee them to be in the playoffs, I think, is how I would put
If
it.
if they get healthy down the stretch, I think they have the ability to be a title contender. I think just with how ravaged they've been, it's hard to make that case outside of what you're saying, being a playoff contender, winning the division, stuff like that.
I'm not there for title contender yet, but I do think deep playoff run is certainly in the mix. I just think teams like, and I know they already played the Lions, but I think teams like the Lions and Packers are just much more talented, and I have people on those teams that I trust more than I trust positions on the Bucks. Like I trust the coaching staff a lot more in Detroit and in Green Bay. I trust like the edge rushers, they're like premier edge rushers a lot more. I don't say that I would trust Goff and Love more than I trust Baker. They're kind of in the same bucket to me in terms of go and win me a game. And then I think there are star levels or players that are playing at star levels at other places on those teams that I would take over the Buccaneers players.
I would take Baker immediately over Jared Goff and Jordan Love. He has been
It's
Mr.
not a
Clutch this year.
it's not
And
about would you
so
take him over those. It's like would you take him on his team over Goff on the Lions or
so
Love on the
when
Packers?
when it
I would
comes to
not.
January, a lot of the gimmicky stuff goes out the door, and the Buccaneers, like you're saying, they don't have a premier edge rusher like the Packers and Lions do, but they've generated like the most like sacks and pressure during like the Todd Bowles era. If it's not the most, like they're second up to like the top. So they're able to generate pressure on that front. And then when you look on the offensive side, I think this is like where if they get guys healthy, it's like if you get Mike Evans back in the fold, you get Chris Godwin, you still have Emeka Ibuka, you have Tristan Wirfs back, you have Graham Barton, you have playmakers all over that. Bucky Irving comes back into the lineup. It's stuff along those lines. That's where I'm saying that I think they can be mentioned with the top of the NFC, because I think a quarterback like Baker puts you over the top. I would take Baker over with a healthy Bucks team over some of these other teams in the NFC, just because like he's shown it down the stretch. I would not trust Jared Goff or Jordan Love with the game on the line. And I think that's the difference when we talk about these teams, but they have to get healthy. So when we talk about the NFC South, I'm with you that they are playoff contenders now. I just think if they're healthy, they are in that next year.
That we're gonna disagree on that one. I think we're just gonna go back and forth. Like also, Lafleur's been to the conference championship. Jared Goff's Lions have been to the conference champion. Like
Has
they've
Jordan
gotten there.
Love been to the championship game though? Like he's
he
made it
was
to the
on. He was
divisional
on the
round.
team.
I
don't.
I'm
He
aware. I'm
wasn't
just saying as
the
a starter,
starter
it
though.
wasn't
No.
like, and that's where like we haven't seen
Yeah.
it come together, and it should this year. I'm just saying like if we get a divisional round game of like the Lions Bucks, I think the Bucks win that, and then it's like if it's the Packers like and Bucks, it's probably like in Lambeau. So at that point, you probably lean Packers just because of home field. But that's what I'm saying. It's like like those lines are going to be so close. Those games are going to be so great. Like that's what we're leading up to this January.
For sure. Like, again, Tampa's going to make the playoffs. I have no doubt about that. We can. We've talked about Carolina already. We're at 4-4, the only 500 team in the league to this point, which is kind of interesting. Our defense has improved from worst ever to probably close to middle of the pack this year. We just need Bryce Young under center, and he needs to play to what he's capable of, like what we saw in the Cowboys game, managing the game well, finding the stuff. That's what we need to see. And then the note about the leadership council that you talked about, I think if the players are more involved in decision making, stuff's going to be better. So the Panthers are in second place. They're right there with the Falcons for third place as well. But this is about what we expected, right? Tampa far away one, and then Panthers contending for two. The Falcons are a very interesting team to me because I don't think they're a good team. I think the stuff about the Falcons having the number 2 total defense or the number 3 total offense, which is it's just the number of yards that they score or that they gain and allow. I think that's a bunch of like crap. I think it doesn't show what this team actually is. They're like a high variance team on defense. They live on turnovers and pressures. They can get gashed like down to down on offense. I think that they're like a fake good team. Michael Penix, even through 6 games because he didn't play this last game, he's what I expected him to be. I haven't seen a lot of improvement in terms of accessing the middle of the field, in terms of getting rid of the sprays across the like outside the numbers near the sidelines. So I don't super trust this offense to improve. What I will say though is that they have incredible skill position players, and when you have that, that can be an equalizer. I think that's why they're going to hang around third place. I had the Saints fourth coming into the season, and that's where they're at right now. They currently have the number 1 pick. They're just a straight up bad team. The defense is awful. The offensive line didn't hold up as well as I think we hoped coming into the year. Alvin Kamara got like 6 snaps last week. I think he's about to get traded. And they just announced today on October 28th that Tyler Shuck, the second round rookie quarterback, is going to be the starter, at least for this week. So the Saints are just bad. There's not much more to say about them. But between the Panthers and Falcons, I think the Panthers have positioned themselves to be able to take the second spot in the division. But that's like, it's not a great consolation unless you can contend for the division or put some wins together down the stretch, because the NFC is just loaded this year. So a wild card berth seems super unlikely for either of those teams.
Yeah, a wild card berth for the NFC South with just how stacked the NFC is probably unlikely. If you want to make the dance as a team from the NFC South, you got to win the division, and it's going to be hard to kind of jump above Tampa Bay for a lot of the reasons we were just discussing. But talking about the Falcons, like this is a team where Michael Penix, like he has a big arm. He can access some throws on the boundary that I would say only a like maybe 10 quarterbacks in the league can do to maybe the extent that he can, and it maybe even a smaller list than that. And so it's impressive on that front, but like you said, he can't see the middle of the field. He has no touch, and it's easy for defenses to start taking away what he does well. And obviously, he was hurt, and Kirk Cousins was in, and Cousins had himself an Andy Dalton moment against the Miami Dolphins this past weekend. So, them getting absolutely stomped at home by a really bad team was kind of embarrassing to watch and kind of unexpected because they typically are a better team at home. So it's just they've been up and down throughout the course of the season. I'd expect that volatility to continue for Atlanta because of exactly what you laid out. You have guys like Bijan Robinson and Drake London who can just go off and have nuclear performances. You can have their defensive coordinator. They brought in Jeff Ulbrich from the Jets last year. He's dialed up some game plans where he's stifled some of the better offenses. So like that's where they seem to be finding their wins across the margins. And then to your point about the Saints, this is a roster devoid of talent. I think they've done a good job at locking or drafting younger pieces on the offensive line, retaining a guy like Chase Young a little bit more long term.
And Chase Young's
So
been very good this year, I should say.
yeah, and he's been good for him over the past couple years. He's been with them, so it's just they've been good to the players that have been loyal to them. They've gotten some production out of these guys to where I don't think this is like not an NFL roster. I think they have kind of like the structure to keep building this, but we'll see what Tyler Shuck is. If they end up snowballing themselves into the first overall pick, it's they probably take a quarterback and then they start rebuilding in other areas of the roster that they need to address. So I'll be interested to see kind of what the offseason looks like more for the Saints. I don't see them making really any more noise the rest of the year to warrant any, I would say, attention, if we call it that.
They're probably going to be a seller at the deadline, which is the trade deadline, which is November 4th. 1 week from today is the NFL trade deadline. So we'll see if they sell anybody. Do you think they'll
Did
end
you
up?
see Kool-Aid McKinstry this past Sunday? Some of
Yes,
the reps he had against.
excellent game, and yeah, the red zone coverage.
Yeah,
I can't
that's what
believe
I'm
he
saying.
made
Like
it
if
to the
we had
second
had
round 2 years ago. Yeah,
that's and this is I'm just gonna keep bringing this up. He was like one of the like five guys that I wanted over Xavier Legette. And it's just like him with JC Horn, like, oh my gosh, like you would not be able to
hmm
throw on us. But I digress. Continue.
incredible player. Alabama corner, of course, Kool-Aid McKinstry. But I was going to ask you, of the three 1-7 teams, and I'm also going to throw in Cleveland and Miami, who are 2-6. Do you think the Saints have the best chance at getting that number one pick? So it's the Saints, the New York Jets, the Tennessee Titans. These teams are all 1-7, and then I was going to include Cleveland and Miami, who are both 2-6. Like, do you think the Saints have the best chance of that number one pick, or do you think I personally think Tennessee has the worst roster in the league, and their one win was incredibly fluky against Arizona. I think they have a good chance at the number one pick, but I think the Saints probably need it the most because they need that quarterback.
I would say Cam Ward, I think, is better than like the Tyler Shuck, Spencer Rattler duo. I you play in the AFC South. That division is like it's been playing better this year, but you wonder if like one of those teams gets a little banged up 1 week and they're able to kind of punch them when they're least expecting. I feel like they don't get the number one overall again because it's just like we just saw this with the Jaguars a couple years ago, and maybe that's the case. Maybe they end up with it, but I find it hard that they're going to beat out the Saints for it. The rest of the teams, like I feel like the Dolphins, the Browns, they'll find a couple wins on the schedule to kind of stay out of the first overall pick, but I can definitely see another top five pick for those franchises. And then the Jets.
Let me read you the Jets schedule to help you out here. Okay, they're on a bye week this week, and then they have Cleveland. You could picture that as a winnable game. Then the rest of their games are New England, Baltimore, Atlanta, Miami, maybe Miami,
In
Jacksonville.
Atlanta, I'm not going to write off
All right,
Atlanta.
Atlanta, Miami, Jacksonville. Then they play at New Orleans. This could be the game to determine the number one overall pick. And then the last two are New England and Buffalo again. So there are wins there for the Jets. For New Orleans, let me pull up their schedule: Rams, Panthers, Falcons, Dolphins, Bucks, Panthers again, Jets, Titans, Atlanta. So I think there are much more. Or there are a lot more winnable games, I think, for the Saints out there if Tyler Shuck is able to do anything. Like if Kellen Moore can get some stuff to work with the Saints, I think they have a chance to finish 3-14 as opposed to the Jets or Titans maybe going 2-15.
Well, like you said, don't the Saints have the Jets and Titans in back-to-back weeks? Like that
Yep, to
that
end the season.
stretch, but that,
Or
like
not to
that
end the
to
season, but
me,
like the
yeah,
before
like
the division game, yeah.
and to me, like that is what's going to determine that because I could see these teams going on some skids and it just being a matter of how those games end up determining tiebreakers because that will be huge, especially from a strength of schedule standpoint, how that all factors out. So we'll stay tuned with that. Like I said, that's getting in the draft and off season outlooks, and
Yeah,
we're
and
just
we're
now
not there
approaching the
yet,
halfway. Yeah,
because we're
we're
at
at the
800 or
halfway point.
500. Yeah.
So we'll focus on the positives. We have the Packers this coming week in Lambeau. Not looking too favorable. I think if we can lean on Rico Dowdle and a quick passing attack to minimize kind of what Micah Parsons can do, he's gotten after Bryce Young the couple games he's played against them. So I think nullifying him and neutralizing that part of the defense is going to be huge on Sunday. Are there any other key takeaways you have about Sunday or just what we've talked about today before we hop on Purrfect Takes?
We got to stop. Where would you rank Tucker Craft right now? With Bowers
Oh no
hurt,
no did I
is
I, I
he
already I already jumped the preview. We got so caught up in the
yeah.
our
Where
preseason.
would you rank
Yeah,
Tucker Craft? With Bowers hurt, is he the best tight end in the league right now?
no, he's not the best tight end. George Kittle is,
Well, Kittle just got back too,
but
so
he's
he's a little
healthy.
rusty. I don't know. Kraft is certainly the best fantasy tight end the last few weeks. As a Tucker Kraft owner, I am aware of that. That's my key in this game. Is the Buffalo Bills didn't really use their tight ends, which was odd considering it was National Tight End Day or whatever that holiday is. But the Panthers have struggled against tight ends all season, and Kraft just takes advantage of defenses. I think he's a mismatch against any type of defender you can throw out, unless you have like a Fred Warner, and nobody has a Fred Warner right now. So that's going to be my key: is how do you limit Tucker Kraft? Jordan Love, he's spreading the ball around a bit more now that Christian Watson's back, but you just got to take away one person, I think, and if you can funnel it to Kraft or try to get rid of Kraft, I think you have a chance to not give up 40 points again, which I think is the first objective. And then, like you said, on offense, lean into Rico Dowdle, build some stuff with a quick pass and with the play action off of what Dowdle's able to do. And then maybe you can make it a close game. I do think the Packers are going to win this game. That's how it's going to be. I said this is going to be the best team the Panthers face all season, and I'm sticking by that. But there's a chance you can make it a close game.
So like we played the Bills this year. I wouldn't put the Jaguars up there in terms of like a top tier team, but like when you start looking at who the Panthers have played and who the Panthers have lost to, like this game just screams like another 40-point burger. Like the Patriots and the Bills just did it. I feel like the Packers are in that echelon, if not like what you said, like even a tier above that. And so if that's the case, like I don't see us hanging with this team, especially given like the holes on the defensive side. Like you talked about Tucker Kraft being like one of the best tight ends in football. I agree with you. We allowed Darren Waller, who came out of retirement and stopped his rapping career, to put his helmet back on, and he torched us for 2 touchdowns. And it's just, so we have to deal with that. We have to deal with some of the boundary receivers they have, and that's going to keep us honest and in lighter boxes. And then they're just going to turn and hand it to Josh Jacobs, and they're going to have ways and abilities to get him to the second level. And it's just, you start getting a little bit concerned that they're just going to be able to put their foot on the gas and start running away with this. And so again, I think it goes back to the offensive game plan where you just got to play smart, fundamental football, and you can't have these costly turnovers or mistakes in the red zone, because that, Like that's been something that Bryce has struggled with in the past. Like going up against this guy in particular, Micah Parsons, where it's you're trying to do too much outside of the pocket, and he beats you and he makes a play, and all of a sudden we have another fumble on the turf and kills a drive, and they're up 2 or 3 scores, and that snowballing cannot be what happens on Sunday. But I just don't see how it's not the case.
This is how you win. You don't have the fumbles. That's very fixable. You just hold on to the ball. Bryce struggles with it. Maybe it's because he's a smaller guy.
But it being
Maybe
colder up there too, like is he wearing a glove on
it's
Sunday? Like
November. Like
I'm just saying
it's
it's colder than it is here.
sure. Well, right now it might not be colder. Here in Charlotte, we're going through like a very cold 4-day storm, which is I don't know how to describe it, but the high and the low are like 4 degrees apart, and it's like or 45 degrees the next 4 days. But you hold on to the ball, just be fundamental about it. You have the run game, you possess the ball for a good chunk of the clock. Let's say like 38 or more minutes. Like you want to bleed this clock out, and with a run game, that's how you do it.
If you're able to possess the ball for 38 minutes, then yeah, we win the game. I don't see how we get above 30 minutes against this Packers team.
They don't score, they score quick. Like they're very good at getting down the field quickly. That's how you do it. You bleed them out. That's how the Texans beat the 49ers this past week. They just ran the ball the whole game, did quick passes that were tackled inbounds so that when the 49ers had a couple 3-and-outs, the game was over. That's how they did it. The Texans probably weren't supposed to. That's how they did it. And then the final piece is you affect Jordan Love. Josh Allen, this is what I'll say. I think the Packers are the best team we're going to face. Josh Allen's the best quarterback that we're going to face all year. Maybe Dak. Dak might be playing at a better level this season. But you limit the quarterback and get pressure on him, affect him. That can do stuff too. It reminds me of how we played against the Eagles last year. The Eagles go on to win the Super Bowl, right? They beat the Panthers. It was what, 22-16 or something. It was within 6 points because if we get scored and we get the extra point, we go up by 1. The way we did that was we affected Jalen Hurts. So if you're able to make Jordan Love second guess, have him throw a couple sprays, stuff like that, that's another key. But you got to do that. You got to control the ball. You got to run the ball at a high degree. And that's a tall ask for this team. But if Bryce Young's back, if Dowdle gets most of the carries, I think it can be done. But with that being said, my take is the Packers in those just horrendous uniforms that I don't know if anyone's seen them. It's their 102-year throwback uniforms. It's like a Notre Dame uniform with a leather helmet. I think they will score 30 and the Panthers lose. That's going to be my take.
Who scores 30?
The Packers.
Oh, they scored.
Yeah.
I thought you were saying the Panthers score like 30 and they lose. I'm like, that's crazy that you're expecting this to be a shootout.
It could be. It could be. We've seen it happen this year.
Yes and no. We haven't seen the Packers win a game by more than 14 points all year, and that was in week 1 against the Detroit Lions. They just won against the Steelers on Sunday Night Football. It was Sunday Night Football. I was getting confused with the Monday night game last night, but they win on prime time and they only win by 10 points. They rally back. They don't have that signature just monster win given their roster. And Dave Canales doesn't just lose. And like, I know you're pointing to like the Eagles, and you could even look at the Chiefs game last year and be like, oh, look, like we held our own with these heavyweights, and maybe we find a way to do it. Maybe we find a way to give Jordan Love hell. Rico Dowdle finds way to convert. Like that's the thing. Like where you're talking about time of possession being 38 minutes, like it's going to have to be 30 plus minutes in order for us to kind of stay in this and just take away opportunities from the Packers. And so it's the possibility is always there. There's always a non-zero chance. It's just for me, the Packers not having the signature win, this Panthers team getting blown out and losses. It just seems like we're out of our element and this could get ugly fast. And so that's where I lean. So I like your take that the Packers win, they score 30 or more. I'm going to add on to it and say that they win this game by 20 plus points. I don't see this being a close game in Lambeau. I think this is one of the statement wins they look back on if they make a title run and they go, this was a turning point for our season that we put it all together here. And I hate that it's us, but it's hard for me to look at this roster and say that we hold our own when we start getting down 2 or 3 possessions. And that just seems like the game script in Lambeau.
I wouldn't call it a turning point if they do that, considering they're 5-1-1 right now. But I see what
But
you
they
mean.
haven't won it. Like they haven't won by more than 14. Like we think of this as like being one of the best rosters in the league. It's like I believe the Eagles have won like a big game like by more than that spread, and they're a struggling team coming off the Super Bowl. Like the Chiefs just won last night by 21 points. Like it's just those kind of victories. Like the Packers don't have that currently.
Yeah, the Eagles' largest margin of victory was 18 points this past week
Okay,
against
against
the
the
Giants.
Giants, yeah.
And then who'd you say? Kansas City.
They
Uh,
just had 21
they
last night, but I
just
think they've
they
had bigger
destroyed the
ones.
Raiders,
Yep.
31-0. I was looking at the weather just to because it was sticking with me. It's 5 degrees colder in Charlotte than it is in Green Bay currently, but on Sunday it's supposed to warm up here a little bit, so they might take the cake there. I think that's going to do it. I think we did a good job talking about how the Panthers stack up at the halfway point. Maybe at the 3/4 point, we can revisit this because that'll be right around our bye week, I think. And then we'll have to figure out how we can make the playoffs if we're still in the hunt. But until then, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Twitter, wherever you get your content. Hopefully, we'll be able to discuss a Panthers win next week. Cross your fingers, hold your breath, do whatever you got to do. But until then, keep pounding.